Welcome to Faces of Fleet, an interview series from Work Truck, where we take a more personal look at the many faces of fleet and the interesting people who are behind the industry. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Vice President of Content at Bobbitt, and today I'm chatting with Dan Fierro, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Flexco Fleet Services. Dan's journey into the fleet industry wasn't really a straight path. It was shaped by resilience, mentorship, and a deep sense of community. Growing up in Wilmington, California, a place I called home when I was younger as well, Dan learned early on the value of having someone's back. Baseball became a major part of his life, leading him to LA Harbor College and then Cal State LA, where he studied criminal justice. His career could have taken him into law enforcement, but a mentor at Ryder convinced him to stay, setting him on a 10-year path in fleet. Beyond his career, Dan has always found a way to give back, from mentoring kids as a camp counselor to coaching his own children's teams, and earning multiple Parent of the Year awards along the way. 8 years ago, he took a leap and moved to the East Coast with Flexco, expecting it to be temporary. Now, with his daughter in school and his son living just down the street, he's still there and loving it. So I couldn't wait to dive deeper with Dan and find out how his background and experiences, both on and off the field, have shaped his leadership, his approach to business, and his passion for the fleet industry. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. We appreciate being here.
So you grew up in Wilmington, a place I know well, as I mentioned earlier, and it really shaped your outlook on life. How did that environment influence the way you approach work and the relationships today?
Sure. So Wilmington is a unique city in the city of Los Angeles, but it wasn't the easiest place to grow up in. So really learning to survive in an environment like that, you really had to find the good and things that happened every day there. Also some resilience, getting back past some stuff, and then people having your back. We teamed up with I had a lot of family, friends, and we just learned that hey, we got each other's back, and we look out for each other, and that level of community within that community really helped us to get through that, and actually, it was an overall good experience for me as a kid. So,
baseball was clearly a huge part of your life. You mentioned how your college coach played such an important role in your future. Can you tell me more about that moment when he pulled you and your friend back into the game?
Yeah, that's funny. So baseball, it's any sports we played as kids. We played intensely. We played all the time, so we got a lot of those hours in. And, through high school, playing, almost every day, we got to a good competitive level, and we did well in high school. In fact, my high school our team is still one of the better high school teams that school's ever produced. And then at the end of it, senior year, I had no aspirations to go to college or anything like that, and was just hanging out. I was going to be a pipe fitter with one of my buddies, a gentleman by the name of Henry Rodriguez. And him and I, he was our shortstop, and we're just hanging out all summer, really doing nothing. And then we got a phone call from one of the coaches at LA Harbor, a gentleman by the name of Jim O'Brien, and he had heard that we weren't doing anything, and so he had invited us over to a barbecue he was having, and he had asked us if we wanted to play in the summer league. And we're like, oh, what the heck, we'll do it. And we showed up, and he had paperwork ready for us, and he basically said back then at a junior college you could sign us up. They had just won state the year prior, and so showed up, started playing, and next thing I know, I made the team, and that put me back. It put me into college, and with a focus to graduate and to transfer. So it was pretty cool. Yeah.
And then you made an interesting shift from playing baseball to studying criminal justice. What drew you to that field? And did you ever think that you'd actually go into law enforcement?
Yeah. So when I transferred, as a left-handed pitcher in a junior college, there were more opportunities than right-handed pitchers, and so there was a few other opportunities I was looking at. And Cal State LA was a school I transferred to. But my girlfriend, who is my wife, we just celebrated 35 years of marriage, 40 years together. She was going to that school, and she was studying criminal justice. And so it was a little bit of convenience, a little bit I didn't want to, love with my wife, didn't want to, part ways, move out of the state, and was a little intimidated by anything else. And I went the easy path, I think, and criminal justice seemed pretty easy to me. and it gave me the ability to to play baseball, to work, to study, and it wasn't a hard major at all. So, and my wife was in the same major, so that helped.
So while you were in college, I know you started working at Ryder, and that job turned into a decades long career. What made you choose to stay in fleet instead of going into criminal justice or another path?
Yeah, well, it took me 5 years to graduate, so it was year five when I went and found a part-time job working for Ryder on the renting trucks, right? And I was already done with baseball and eligible. I played, 3.5 years at the college level, and stopped playing because I hurt myself. But yeah, when I was there, I was still finishing up my degree, and some some key people in my life were not in my life, but there at Ryder were very instrumental in convincing me to stick around because I wasn't all in with the criminal justice. I just wasn't a cop. I'm just not somebody who's fit for that. My kids say if I ever went that route, probably would have been killed the first 2 weeks because I just fall for everything, right? But yeah. Yeah. So anyways, they had a program, a management program that I jumped in on from an operating standpoint. So I was running a branch out of LAX for for about a good year and a half, 2 years there, and then was in that full service leasing industry for 10 years.
You and your wife were also camp counselors, you mentioned during college, working with kids from Compton and Paramount. For folks who may not know, those are communities that really benefit from strong mentorship. What was that experience like, and how did it shape your perspective on giving back?
Wow. Well. Yeah. That program was a pretty cool program. And I grew up in Wilmington, and then I went to high school in Paramount. So Compton borders it, and there was an area where a lot of kids are susceptible and to gang recruitment, right? That was pretty big, and so the program was developed, and they're getting these kids and taking them out to Big Bear, right? For about four nights, and a lot of these kids had never left town, never left the city limits of Compton or Paramount. And so to me, it brought a little humility in that side because I was that kid. So it was just kind of cool to show them something different. For them to break down the barriers. It happened relatively quickly too, because the age groups were from 8 to 12, and so we thought that they were more susceptible at that age group. But yeah, we learned to make connections. That was huge. Build trust. And just letting them know we had their best interest in mind. And just their best interest was to have fun and to see something different. And so that was kind of cool.
I love how you described giving those kids a chance to just be kids. To put this into perspective for our audience, Big Bear, without traffic, is only about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive away from that area. But for many of these kids, it was totally out of reach. So getting them the chance to go and see someplace beautiful really was life changing.
Yeah, I mean, I had not been there. I'd never been there. I'd never seen snow till I was like 21 years old, right? So yeah, I was definitely one of those kids, and I could relate at that moment. So definitely.
Now let's shift to work life balance, something I think we can all relate to, at least the challenges of. You've grown a clearly demanding career while also raising a family, and I loved hearing that you won Parent of the Year twice. How did you make the shift from long hours to being fully present for your kids?
Yeah, it actually was one incident where I developed H. pylori bacteria, which gave me the ulcers, bleeding ulcers, and so I almost bled out one day. And after that, my uncle, who was always been a mentor of mine, he grew up in the same neighborhood I did. He became a doctor, and it was like, yeah, you need to change your life. You need to, and it's brought on by H. pylori, but he thought, at the moment it could be stress related and stuff like that. And he just says, you need to really change some things, because I had a 1 year old at the time, barely one, infant. And we were just in the morning, waking up at 6 in the morning, patting him on his butt in the crib and leaving, and then coming back. at 9 o'clock at night, and something had to change. And so I jumped into sales for Ryder, and on the rental side, doing long-term rentals, right? That was the way to break in. That was a lady by the name of Doreen Coddington, who was a big staple in for Ryder. She was a huge mentor of mine, and she believed in me, and so she brought me into sales. So that allowed me to have that flexibility. Now, mind you, you've got to perform and you've got to produce, and we did that, but it allowed me to go out, go home, to have that flexibility to come and do things, but also it allowed me to come back and work at a later time. And so basically that's where it was. It's just aligning my priorities. A major event made it happen, and I never looked back. So I've always not been cheated. I always never got cheated, being a parent. And that parent of the year, those parent of the year awards were my son's kindergarten class, and first time a father had ever won it, and then my daughter comes 7 years later, same teacher, same class, and it was me again. So it was still the same, the only father to ever get it as well. So
That matters so much. Being there for your kids is everything. I once read that if you can show up for the important moments in your children's lives and your career allows that, that's when you're truly winning. I also loved something you said when we spoke earlier. I think the saying goes, the past is in the past, the future isn't promised, and the present is a gift. And I think it's such an important reminder to live in the moment. And you really did that 8 years ago when you took the leap to move to the East Coast for Flexco. What was that transition like? And did you ever expect to still be there today?
I didn't. When the opportunity came about, Brian Myers, he's my predecessor as a vice president of sales and marketing for Flexco. Him and I worked together, and he presented the opportunity and had me meet with the shoemakers, Ron and Chad. Ron being the founder, Chad being the current CEO. And so when they produced the opportunity, I said, yeah, we'll take it. But I'm going to come back in 3 or 4 years. And they're like, yeah, no, we appreciate you doing that. That's the plan, right? So when it came about, we moved to Baltimore and in an area called Locust Point, which is a really unique community here. And we've always made friends along the way, and we connected with a lot of people here. And then my wife was, teaching at an all-girls Catholic high school that she really loved. And my daughter still remaining at the time, she was in undergrad and just about to graduate, and she was going to go to New York. And she's like, I don't want to leave. And so we decided to stick around. We got it. We made friends. We developed a community. We had faith from guys like Brian and Ron and Chad, and it continued on. So we're still here, which is crazy.
So, family has clearly been a huge part of your life. I mean, your son is living just down the street, your daughter is in law school in your area. How does it feel having them so close while they're carving out their own paths?
Yeah, I'm still beside myself that I have both my kids so close to me. And actually, my daughter is living with us right now. She's doing a summer internship in D.C. for a law firm. So she's about to go into year 3 of law school, and so she's here every day. So I got both my knucklehead kids. I love having them we see them every day. They're bantering back and forth. My daughter-in-law is part of it as well. And it's just phenomenal, to have that, because it was heartbreaking a little bit for me to have one kid on the East Coast, right? Can we live without them? They move on, yes, but the fact that my son Spencer and his wife decided to move back here was pretty cool. I think they wanted it to be close, but yeah, we're thrilled. We love it.
So, looking back at your career, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in fleet or maybe considering a career on the sales side of the industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this can go with anything, but I would say make connections. Develop a really quality circle of influence, within your friend groups, and make that friendship wide and true. Incorporate a few people that have a variety of expertise, and also the right attitude that you have, right? So it's a karmic world, and you select and you make your friends, and be mindful in who you put, who you belong, who you bring into that circle, that they're givers as well as you, so yeah, develop those connections, be givers, and make friends along the way. I've got a lot of friends that I've made in my life and career.
And finally, bringing it back to fleet. This is probably one of my favorite questions to ask. What is the one thing you love the most about this industry?
Okay, so I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to go back to the friendships we've made along the way, right? That's huge. That's kind of my tagline these days, as of late. And as the people who work for me, my sales team, that they know me, and I was like, get out and meet people and get to know people, right? And be givers. The other thing too, from this is more directly related to fleet, is that I really like fleet because of the diversity and the disciplines that we learn from it. Right? You learn finance, logistics, procurement, analytics. You go from every life cycle of the vehicle from cradle to grave, and there's so many different aspects of it, right? And to become expertise in all of it, it makes a well-rounded business person. So that's kind of what I really love about the industry.
Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and share your passion and personal story. For anyone interested in more episodes of Faces of Fleet or Truck Chat, make sure you check out the links below. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Hit that like button and drop a comment to let me know who I should chat with next. And be on the lookout for more episodes of Truck Chat coming soon, where I'll continue to focus on the people and the issues that matter most to work truck fleets.